Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final episode of True Crime Guru for 2023. I will be off the next 2 weeks for the holidays, but I will be back the first Sunday of 2024, January 7th. Just a quick thank you for your guys' support so far, and I am looking forward to bringing you more content and better quality videos in the new year. To make sure that you don't miss out on any content, please make sure you subscribe and also follow the channel on all social media platforms for important updates and engagement. Today's case takes us to Tempe, Arizona, which is the town that holds Arizona State University. It was here in 1997 when 21-year-old senior Fiona Yu was brutally murdered in what detectives described as a Blitz attack. Just a warning, today's episode does include sensitive subject matter such as sexual assault that may be triggering for some viewers. Fiona Yu was actually born in Canada. Her parents, Philippe and Cecilia, were originally from China and through the work of fate, met in Canada and fell in love. They would go on to have 4 children, including Fiona, who was born on October 15, 1975. Fiona was always a shy and introverted person, even as a child, but she was particularly close with her sister Samantha. In 1986, Philippe and Cecilia decided it was time for a change and decided to immigrate the family to Arcadia, California. It was here where Fiona graduated high school in 1993. Education was very important to Fiona, so deciding where she was going to further her education was important. She ultimately decided to become a Sun Devil at Arizona State University. She was studying accounting and was very focused on her studies. She definitely was not concerned about partying or letting loose like some college students. Her friend Chuck Williams told the Arizona Republic, quote, "She was not about getting into trouble. She was into books. She was really trying to make it through school. She was a good student. She was always doing homework." End quote. Even though her main focus was on school, Fiona did manage to come out of her shell socially during her time at ASU. She had a lot of friends that described her as a very sweet and kind person. Her coworkers at the ASU alumni gift shop where she worked said that Fiona often brought them gifts and treats, which of course was very thoughtful. She even had a boyfriend named Mark. Everything was going according to plan for Fiona, so when senior year came around in 1997, she was really looking forward to graduating and getting her life started. She had no way of knowing that before the school year even began, someone would rob her of that. It was a hot day on August 4th, 1997, 106 degrees Fahrenheit or 41 degrees Celsius. Fiona had been on campus all summer because she was enrolled in some summer courses, so this day started out just like any other for Fiona. She had attended her classes and worked a shift at the gift shop. She got off around 4 and was last seen riding her bike to her off-campus apartment around 4:30. I am going to try to be as clear as I can with the timeline for you guys, but keep in mind that some of these times are approximate, and it does become important later on, so bear with me. Fiona lived in the Cypress Gardens apartments, which were about a half a mile away from campus. And I have to give it to Fiona because riding a bike for a half a mile while it is 106 degrees out is definitely not something I would want to do. Fiona was next seen by a neighbor at the mailboxes around 5:10 p.m. As far as I know, this neighbor did not report that Fiona was in any distress or anything abnormal. One of her roommates, Kazu Ito, arrived home around 5:15. She knew that Fiona was home because she saw her bike and her stuff on the lower level of the apartment, and figured that she must be upstairs occupied with something. Kizu would hang out downstairs for about 45 minutes before she suddenly got a weird feeling. It's one of those intuitive feelings that people describe when they know something is wrong. Kizu went upstairs to check on Fiona, and what she would find would be something she would never forget. In front of her lied Fiona. Her clothes were torn, and it was obvious that she had been attacked. Fiona was still alive, but barely hanging on. She would be transported to St. Luke's Hospital, where she would later pass away. Fiona's aunt was the first in the family to find out and had to make the worst call of her life to Fiona's parents. The aunt broke the news to Philippe, who was so devastated that he knew he could not be the one to tell Cecilia. So the aunt broke the news to her as well. Everyone was in shock. Fiona was so sweet and kind and for the most part kept to herself. She had no enemies. She was not in any circumstances that would put her in this kind of risk. No one could come up with any rhyme or reason for this terrible crime. It would be confirmed that Fiona was sexually assaulted and strangled. This is where the timeline becomes important, so I'm going to try and break it down for you guys. Fiona was seen on her bike heading home from campus around 4:30. We know that she made it home before 5:10 because the neighbor reported seeing her at the mailboxes around this time. And then Kizu arrived home around 5:15. This timeline only leaves like 15-20 minutes tops for the attack to occur, which is why detectives would describe it as a Blitz attack. Finding the perpetrator of this Blitz attack would prove to be very difficult. How did the killer get in and out of Fiona's apartment so fast without being seen by anyone? Well, apparently the back sliding door was not functioning properly and therefore was not secure. The theory is that the killer may have been watching Fiona from the back and then snuck in while she went to go get the mail. When she returned, he must have attacked her and then left rather quickly before Kizu got home. A maintenance worker for the apartment community would come forward saying he saw the killer leaving Fiona's apartment, which of course caught the investigators' interest. The maintenance worker described seeing a tall black man, but didn't provide any real distinctive description. And then, a month after the murder, 2 more female ASU students would be attacked and sexually assaulted. The 2 girls thankfully survived, but they did endure a frightening attack. The perpetrators reportedly strangled the victims by hand until they passed out, and then carried out the sexual assault. This all sounded really similar to what happened to Fiona, so time was of the essence to get these monsters off the street before they had the chance to harm anyone else. Locating them wouldn't prove to be too difficult for investigators. The attackers were 2 black teenage males, which did match the description provided by the maintenance worker. The 2 boys readily admitted to the sexual assaults of the 2 female students, but adamantly denied having any involvement with Fiona's assault and murder. Detectives were going to need to be sure, though, and thankfully the killer left behind a boatload of DNA to test against. And in December of 1997, the tests would come back and confirm that neither of the 2 boys were a match to Fiona's killer. Students at Arizona State were fed up with this violence against women in the recent months. There was a large rally and protest on campus speaking out against this violence. They called it Take Back the Day. This outrage only put more pressure on detectives to solve Fiona's murder. Naturally, they had to look at Fiona's boyfriend, Mark Hoffman. Fiona had reportedly tried to break off the relationship in the weeks prior to her murder. Hoffman was questioned, but it was confirmed that he was on the other side of the country in New York at the time of Fiona's murder, and was cleared as a suspect rather quickly. 4 years later, in 2001, a TV show called Murder Reopened would feature an episode about Fiona's case. As far as I can tell, this TV series was very short-lived and only aired a few episodes in 2001, one of them being Fiona's. At this point, detectives had enlisted help from a criminal profiler named John Yarborough, who was interviewed for this episode. Through his analysis of the case, Yarborough theorized that whoever killed Fiona must have blended into the area very well and could have possibly lived or worked nearby. The question that looms for me is, did the killer know Fiona? And if he didn't, then how did he come into contact with her? If the killer knew her, then that would certainly narrow down the pool of suspects. Mark was ruled out, but I did see a lot of online speculation questioning some of these known male friends in Fiona's life. Unfortunately, I did not find any sources that confirmed or denied whether or not they were questioned. It could also be possible that the killer did not know Fiona personally, but only in passing. Perhaps he was in one of her classes or frequented the gift shop where she worked. One person that crossed my mind was the neighbor that reported seeing her at the mailboxes. I have to wonder if he was ever questioned or looked into. Although I will say that putting himself in close proximity to Fiona at the time of her murder would be a pretty stupid thing to do if he was involved. But killers are stupid, and thank God for that. The other option would be that the killer was a complete stranger to Fiona, which statistically would make her murder astronomically harder to solve. John Yarborough did have some insight to provide on how the killer may have come into contact with Fiona. He told Murder Reopened that there were 3 possible scenarios in which the killer carried out this crime. The first one being that he saw Fiona for the very first time that day, possibly on her commute home from work, and then proceeded to follow her and took the opportunity to sneak into her apartment when he had it. The second option would be complete premeditation, meaning that he already had Fiona picked out as a victim, surveilled her for some time, and knew that he could get into her place through the faulty back door, and had that specific day and time picked out for the attack. The only thing that creates a problem for that scenario in my mind is that there was absolutely no guarantee that Fiona was going to be home alone. She had several roommates, which I'm sure all had different schedules. So in order for this scenario to be plausible, the killer would have had to have been surveilling her for quite some time in order to know when she would be alone. And I don't get the impression that this killer would have been that patient. He definitely seems like a sloppy, impulsive kind of attacker for me. And I would think that if he planned this out, then he probably would have planned for the attack to have lasted a lot longer than it did. Yarborough also said that there might have been some level of premeditation, but the attack itself was impulsive in a sense that the killer took the opportunity when he had it, which would be a little more feasible to me. John Yarborough did suggest a subject that needed a little more looking into, and from the comments I read online, people seemed to agree. And that person would be the maintenance man, which would make sense considering that the maintenance man would be super familiar with the complex and the residents that lived there. He might have also had prior knowledge of the broken back door because, well, he was the maintenance man. He did an interview with the show and chose to have his identity concealed. In his interview, he admitted to thinking that Fiona was attractive. In fact, he said, "Most of them are." I found this comment to be hella creepy, as I'm assuming he was referring to the female residents, which would most likely be younger college girls. Any formal investigation into the maintenance man is unknown, and his identity is still unknown to this day. Years would go by without any new leads in Fiona's case, and it unfortunately would grow cold. Until 2017, when investigators decided to use a new tool to assist them in their investigation. They sent the killer's DNA to be analyzed by Parabon Nanolabs. If you consume a lot of true crime, you are probably already familiar with the company, but if you're not, Parabon is a company that specializes in forensic genealogy and DNA phenotyping, which is where they take a sample of DNA and try to create a composite of the subject, which is what they did in Fiona's case. The composite that they came up with is of a Hispanic male, approximately 51 years of age, which would have put him in his mid-20s at the time of the murder. He had black hair, brown or hazel eyes, and a light brown skin color. According to the Tempe Police, this description does match another sexual assault that took place around the time of Fiona's murder. With this analysis, we can definitely rule out Fiona's boyfriend, Mark, as he is white and does not match any of the other features. It even further rules out the two teenagers. But the people that I'm unsure of would be Fiona's friends, the neighbor, and the maintenance man. And the part that I find interesting is that the maintenance man described seeing a black male leaving Fiona's apartment, which we now know does not match the description of the killer. Could he have possibly been trying to throw off the investigation from himself? I, of course, am unsure of his race, as his identity has never been revealed. As I was researching this case, the one feeling that I could not shake was the possibility of Fiona being a victim of a hate crime. Hate crimes against Asian Americans are all too common and are largely not talked about. According to the FBI's website, there were 466 victims of anti-Asian crimes in 1997. And those numbers unfortunately have not changed much, as there were 499 reported in 2022. I think that this is a very real possibility, especially in a college town where the population is very diverse, and some terrible people may have had a problem with that. Since Fiona was sexually assaulted, I also considered the possibility that Fiona's killer may have had some kind of unhealthy attraction or fetish for Asian women. This is something that is very common, and the urban term for it is yellow fever, which, if you're asking me, is a pretty racist term. According to an article written by Agnes Keku for Scholarly Community Encyclopedia, the origin of Asian fetishes stems from the stereotype that Asian women are submissive. I found this to be interesting, considering that there were no signs that Fiona had resisted her killer or fought back. Agnes also wrote that our culture tends to undermine efforts to combat sexual harassment towards Asian women, and this does put them in more danger for harassment and violence. According to a survey conducted by the Asian Pacific Institute on Gender-Based Violence, 23% of the Asian women surveyed said that they had experienced some form of sexual violence, and 10% had experienced attempted or completed rape. When I think about this in relation to Fiona's murder, I have to wonder that if her race and gender played a role in her killer's motivation. Fiona Yu's case is a tricky one because there are so many possibilities to consider. The Tempe police are still actively working the case and have more to go on thanks to the analysis from Parabon Nanolabs. I wonder if they've considered using genealogy to help track down Fiona's killer. They've already taken one step in this direction with phenotyping, so I wonder if trying to find Fiona's killer through his family members has been considered. With them having the DNA, I really feel like this case is extremely solvable, and I hope that they can bring answers and closure to Fiona's loved ones soon. If you have any information regarding the murder of Fiona Yu on August 4th, 1997, you are encouraged to reach out to the Tempe Police Department at 480-350-8311. You can also use the silent witness line at 480-948-6377. Thank you everyone for watching. This is the last episode of True Crime Guru for this year, but I will be back with brand new episodes starting January 7th, 2024. I really hope to bring you better quality content in 2024, so please subscribe to make sure that you don't miss out. While you're at it, please follow the channel on all social media platforms where I openly encourage commentary and engagement. If you have a case in mind for the channel, you can feel free to DM me on social media, or you can email me at truecrimeguruchannel@gmail.com.